the benefits of living in a Dharmic culture is your mind is more focused on the spirit rather than material acquisition, economics, your status in society. It's much more of a, let's say, a collectivist approach because you're connected to something much greater than yourself. And in India, it's usually Shiva or Vishnu, right? You're either a Shaiva or a Vaishnava. These are Shiva and Vishnu are representations of the ultimate Brahman, right? And so you're either connected to one of those devatas, Ishta devatas, and that's the benefit of being in a Dharmic culture. Like you and I have taken many people to India, and as soon as you get off the plane, the senses are overwhelmed, right? Because you've come from maybe a stale environment that has lost its culture and its tradition, and then you come and it kind of just sort of hits you in the face, right? And every corner you go to, there's a shrine, there's a temple down every street. It's you cannot avoid it, right? It's everywhere, and 80 to 88%, 90% of people in India are Hindu, right? And so you've got this spirit that pervades the entire country, and it's hard to avoid, but it gives people that sense of belonging and identity that a lot of other cultures are, for some reason, willingly getting rid of. But India nowadays is doubling down on that. And I think the benefits, particularly for as foreigners, which most people listening and watching this podcast probably are foreigners, is that you go there and you feel that same sense of belonging, connected to that deeper knowledge. You may not look the same as an Indian person, but you feel connected to it in some way. Maybe it's good past life karma, we don't know, right? But you've been drawn to the knowledge, you've been drawn to the culture, and it feels more comfortable being in India than maybe your familiar environment.
That's right.
Like the very first time we went to India, we went to Calcutta. Calcutta is probably not the best Indian city, but it's very lively and it has a good energy and a good vibe. But as soon as I arrived there, I felt like I'd been there before. It was like a sense of belonging, and there's good banter with the locals. There's a real vibe going on that I can only relate to when I was a really young boy. When in North Queensland, Australia, there was that banter existed, and then obviously slowly over time that was kind of phased out, because people started sitting at home watching TV, and then they sit at home on their phones, and it goes further and further away from the actual spirit of the place, right?
Yes. A lot of people nowadays think of culture that is actually same and equal everywhere. You mentioned earlier briefly that same and equal is in like a degree of impact that has on individuals the same. And I don't want to say which culture is better or worse, but it does affect differently to the individual between the cultures I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And also, each cultures have a different degree of conditioning individual as well. And it seems like most likely that affluent cultures seem to condition individuals a lot heavier than traditional cultures.
Yep.
That is to show that affluent cultures are probably more unnatural and mechanical to human beings than traditional culture.
Sure.
So that, and most of us are coming from affluent and modern culture, unfortunately, these days. So that somewhat they want to defend their cultures, and they also want to say that this is the way it is, and so you need to follow how things are these days and whatnot. But more you think like that, more you actually get conditioned by these cultures in your close environment, right? But cultures actually build the walls in individuals' mind. Because what is culture? Culture builds like a common bond between the people in the community and society, so that that builds certain customs and how to behave and how to get along with each other, right? And that's what culture is. So that we cannot be raised without culture. every single one of us, right? And at the same time, that means culture builds our entire framework in our mind to the creating some kind of perception, which seeing the world, right? That perception is, the values are based on your familiar environment and culture, and at the end, that builds walls in your mind actually, because outside of that culture, you'll find it hard to make sense of different things. Right, so in the other words, you can say it builds actually limitation within your mind, and that's what cultures do. Even in Dharmic cultures, in Dharmic cultures that has its certain degrees of conditioning, but because it's based on traditional values, the conditioning won't be as heavier as from affluent cultures, I think. So that's something we need to remember. That's why I think a lot of people from developed countries, when they come across these ancient knowledge, because they don't have much experience of these Dharmic cultures, they misinterpret and also misunderstand this knowledge. So easily get led to be a bit new agey and a little bit the certain concepts they take in a very airy-fairy way, right? Completely like a not grounded way at all. So yes, like you said, not everyone can visit those countries, right? But at least we can keep that in mind, that this ancient knowledge, spiritual knowledge, come from certain place which are actually far, far away from where you are. So keep that in mind when you study these knowledge, so that they can eventually help you to open up that limitation.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting what you said, especially about affluent as opposed to like Dharmic traditional cultures. If you look at a lot of affluent cultures, they're kind of rudderless, if you know what I mean. Like there's a culture, obviously, and the culture is developed around materialism, capitalism, if you will, and everything like that. But it's rudderless. You don't really have a sense of belonging or identity, and a lot of people, as a result, don't have any sort of rhyme or reason why they're even alive, right? Because they don't feel connected to something greater than themselves. And that's all due to a lot of affluent cultures, particularly in the West, that have got rid of their tradition because they thought it was something negative, right? And look, you can look at any tradition and you can pick it apart of the negatives and the positives, but usually the positives far outweigh the negatives, right? At least you have a sense of belonging and this and that. Yes, it develops a sense of limitation. There's no doubt about that. So if you're a spiritual aspirant, you do have to go beyond your culture to a certain extent, right? Like culturally, you'll still be who you are. Your idiosyncrasies and that will be in line with that culture. But you are ascending and transcending those limitations as a result. And so the differences between, let's say, a Dharmic culture tradition versus those affluent ones is that the Dharmic culture gives you a way out. Right, so ingrained in the culture is moksha, is liberation in this life, right? Whereas in the affluent cultures don't usually have a religious basis, right? So they're kind of just like, you're stuffed, right? You're a material being, you work, you die, and that's it. It just goes blank, right? But at least with Dharmic cultures, they're liberation based. So actually, it's applauded, right? Like, in Dharmic culture, there's the vanaprastha and the sannyasin, right? The ones who transcend or go to the forest, like a vanaprastha renounces the world, goes to the forest, and relinquishes all social duty because they're concentrating on that their Atman is Brahman, right? And same with the sannyasin, right? And so you've got this embedded in the culture. Liberation is applauded in Indian culture, as we know, right? If someone in the community has attained moksha, man, people are out chanting. Not just cheering and stuff like that. They'll have a whole festival for a sage who is liberated, right? Whereas in the affluent cultures that are material based, there's nothing of that nature. There's no sense of belonging, or there's no way out. It's just grim, dogged existence, right? And so even if we want to look at the Western religions, or we want to look at the Abrahamic religions, they are salvation-based, right? So you have to turn to God to be saved, so to speak, right? Whereas in the Dharmic cultures, you have to merge with God to be liberated. And if you don't merge with God to be liberated in this life, it's no big deal. There's time. There's next life and the life after that. This is not a de facto life, right? This is not the one life philosophy. This is a many life philosophy. So that's where karma comes in the Dharmic tradition. And so that's where the benefits of the Dharmic culture is. There's the acknowledgement of the limitation of the culture. Hence, within the Purusharthas, right, there is the idea of transcending those and becoming a vanaprastha and leaving society. You don't then have to worry about, focusing on your social duty and this and that. And there's also the idea that there is something greater than yourself, always is prevalent in that tradition. Whereas in an affluent culture, there's no awareness that there's something greater than yourself. This is it. You and your bag of bones is it, and that's it, right? So whatever situation that you were born into, you either can accept it or you'll fight it, right? And so in Dharmic culture, there's not even a question of acceptance or fighting the situation. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm born a chaiwala, and you know what? I'm going to be the best damn chaiwala in town, and that's it, And so no one's looking over the fence, right? And so I think that the affluent cultures breed a lot of limitation or breed a lot of scarcity and a lot of lack in their lives. So then their lives feel so hollow. Their soul feels so hollow. And so they're always looking over the fence, what car do they have, or what job do they have, or not happy with the situation I have, right? And so that they are not just limitations, they are like concrete walls that you cannot get over, right? And so in a Dharmic culture, it's accepting that, accepting the causation of your life, accepting your own personal karma, and then moving forward and just seeing where your life pans out, right? Based on the tradition, but with especially if you're a spiritual aspirant, with the mindset that you can become a jivan mukta in this life, right? Someone who is liberated in this life. You don't have to wait till death, and this idea of going to heaven after death and this and that, this doesn't exist in Dharmic cultures, right? And so that's, I think, one of the important differences between both. Because what I see, particularly in affluent cultures all around the world, even people who live in Mumbai, right, in India, is they've given away their tradition and their culture, but their lives are so hollow because it's based on status, money. It's all material. It's all material, right? It's not immaterial. Whereas the Dharmic culture is based on the immaterial. It's based on the spirit. And that's the difference, right? And so, and I think a lot of traditions all around the world were first and foremost based on the spirit in their own way, right? Abrahamic religions in their own way, the pagan traditions of Europe and so forth and so on were all in their own way. But then we've gone through this process of just eliminating this inclination for the ultimate, for the spirit, to replace it with a comfortable and convenient lifestyle.